Good morning and welcome to episode 9 of the Duval 22 podcast. My name is Gus Logue. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by Mookie Alexander of Field Goals, an SB Nation website. Mookie, thank you so much for joining me today to preview Seahawks at Jaguars in week 6. How's this season treated you so far?
Well, it's great to be on, Gus. And yeah, the season's been a little bit up and down, but I think the highs have been a lot higher than fans had expected entering the season. It's just that the lows have really stung because it was two games that came down to the last drive that pretty much ended up in game-losing turnovers. But nevertheless, when the schedule came out, I don't think people had Seattle and Jacksonville being one of the few games in which both teams are above 500 in week 6. I mean, that was not on the cards, maybe more on the Jacksonville side than Seattle, but still, this is a big game for both teams. Kind of like a statement game, if you will, maybe a double statement game, given what Jacksonville did on Monday night.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been kind of the same thing for the Jaguars specifically, where no one was really expecting them to have a record over 500, especially because the schedule at the beginning of the season is harder than at the end of the season. Like the Colts are a lot better than what they thought they would be, but they'll play the Titans twice and have kind of more layup matchups later in the year. But they started out 4-1 despite a tough record. They got a little bit lucky with injuries to the Niners, and then with the Texans being just a disaster, especially along their offensive line. But here we are now, 4-1 Jaguars hosting the 3-2 Seahawks. Definitely a really pivotal game for both teams. I don't know who Seattle has next on their schedule, but for the Jaguars, they play Seattle and then they play the Rams in London before entering their bye week. And so if they can just go 1-1 over the next 2 weeks, I think both the team and their fans will be feeling really good about where they're at during the bye week.
Oh, great. So Seattle and Jacksonville had the same bye week too. Well, this is
Mhm.
funny because obviously Seahawks fans are going to be wanting the Jaguars to do Seattle a solid in London against the Rams. For some reason, I didn't think that was a London game, but yeah, of course, Jacksonville still they have two London games on the schedule, right? Or just one
Just
this
one
year.
this year. They played two the past 2 years.
Okay, so just the one this year, but a pretty important one against the Rams because the Rams are probably going to beat the Ravens, or what's left of them, and that's a bummer because like the Ravens at their healthiest will give the Rams a game, but that ain't happening anytime soon. But Seattle, the week after playing Jacksonville, will be home on Monday night against Houston, and
Mm.
Houston's on a bye this week, so Houston having won two in a row. Maybe there's a little bit of belief now. They beat the Titans and shut them out and they destroyed the Ravens. And as bad as their offense had been the first few weeks of the season, their defense has held up very well all year. And I believe they got the number one scoring defense in the league. So their defense has been as good as advertised. So don't want to let them get rolling offensively, or else they're going to become the team that many people thought they'd be, in terms of being like a division champion, playoff contender, what have you. So I'm sure Jaguars fans are going to be hoping that Seattle can beat Houston the week after this, and that Seahawks fans are hoping the Jaguars can knock off the Rams the week after. I mean, already grateful that Jacksonville beat San Francisco to begin with, and did
Yeah.
so by welcoming Brock Purdy back, by having four turnovers forced on that 49ers offense. So yeah, this is like, AFC versus NFC games are very low priority in terms of tiebreakers because you got to get to like the fifth or sixth tiebreaker when you're talking about common opponents and everything. Not that that hasn't hurt Seattle as recently as last year, but still, I'm very much eager to see how good the Seahawks can be, continue to be on the road, and whether or not this Jaguars run is really real, and that they can have this massive bounce back after the huge disappointment over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, definitely feels like the time of the season where we're kind of figuring out whether these teams are for real, which ones are fraudulent, just regardless of what all the records are. I did a Seahawks podcast last night, and the guys that you set me up with, and they were like super appreciative of the Jaguars beating the Niners. I was like, I mean, you're welcome. It's not like I had anything to do with that, but they were kind of over the moon about that. So obviously, some important games coming up for both teams over the next 2 weeks, starting with Week 6 when the Jaguars host the Seahawks. Mookie, my first question for you regarding Seattle is just what has the Sam Darnold experience been like so far this season? Obviously, in the offseason, when they traded away Geno Smith and then signed Sam Darnold to a 3-year extension, it was met with kind of opinions all over the place, good and bad. But so far this season, Sam Darnold has been objectively good. He ranks first in completion percentage, No, I'm sorry. He ranks first in yards per attempt, but then also top three in completion percentage and passer rating. So he's had a really nice start to the season. What have you seen from Sam Darnold so far?
Well, just to correct one thing, he signed a 3-year free agency contract, but the extension could be coming at this rate the way he's playing. I mean, that's
Mm.
how good Sam Darnold has been. So Seattle has seemingly done it again. They traded Russell Wilson at a time where everybody, self-included, was going, "Oh man, why did you trade Russell away and keep Pete Carroll and John Schneider?" When I at the time I wanted to see what Wilson could look like in Seattle, but with either different management or different coaching. And it turns out it was a great move to move on from Russell Wilson. And the first year of Geno Smith was, and in fact, probably still is better than any of Russ's subsequent seasons post Seattle. So they were able to not have the bottom drop out on them. And Geno was able to have comeback player of the year and this and that and lead Seattle to the playoffs in his first season. But they missed the last 2 years, and then the trade happened. And look, I still love Geno as a great story, but it looks like Seattle's managed to do this again, where they ended up offloading their incumbent quarterback at the right time. Because the way Geno is looking in Las Vegas and the way the Raiders team looks as a whole, they might be contending for the number one overall pick. That's how bad they are, especially when you consider their schedule. So yeah, Geno leading the league in interceptions while Sam Darnold's leading the league in yards per attempt. So you mentioned the completion percentage. Yeah, these are not empty calorie Sam Bradford completions. These are like legitimate. He is being aggressive with the ball. He is generating explosive plays. He's being super accurate, very decisive. There's been very little to complain about in terms of Darnold's play. And now I know the interception at the end of the Tampa Bay game stung. And he was hard on himself, saying he should have set the protection differently because Tampa Bay blitzed, and there was an option on the other side of the field to rookie Torrey Horton that he could have seen if he had set the protection right, but instead he tried to throw it away, hit a Buccaneers helmet, and deflected into the waiting arms of Levante David. Virtually game over. And then, of course, there was the fumble at the end of the 49ers game that is really not on him. It's just Nick Bosa drove Abe Lucas, the right tackle, into his lap and caused the fumble. These things happen. Quarterbacks are not going to be, 100% in clutch situations. He does have a game-winning drive on his resume already, albeit basically a one-play game-winning drive, a deep pass to Jackson Smith-Njigba in the Arizona game that helped Seattle avoid total collapse there. So the way that Darnold looks, um, all of the advanced metrics hold up, and in some respects, he's actually playing better than he was playing in Minnesota. And Minnesota, he put up very gaudy statistics with better receivers. I mean, Jefferson, Addison, you got Jalen Nailor's, I think, a pretty good third option, and then TJ Hawkinson to the back end of the season when he was healthier. But I think that Darnold, what impresses me the most is his ability to improvise. Like, I never thought of him as immobile. I didn't think of him as a Philip Rivers level of statue, but he is making tremendous plays under pressure. The ability to scramble, throw on the run, make the right decision, not panic his way into bad turnovers like he's been prone to in the past. That has been extremely encouraging to me in terms of what he could be the long term. Because of course, Sam Darnold, we've been banging on about his age forever because Darnold's such a heavily hyped prospect at the time. But I might as well fall into the same boat. He's still only 28, and the Seahawks have kind of had this situation before, not with Russell Wilson, but with Matt Hasselbeck, who was not a draft bust by any means, but it took him a bit to get going as a true starting quarterback. And by then he was in his mid to late 20s. So if Darnold keeps this up, if this sustains, and they're going to have some harder games on the schedule, tougher defenses, including this one against Jacksonville, I think there is a legitimate case for Darnold to be the long-term answer. And that's acknowledging the fact that they took Jalen Milroe in the third round. It was kind of a hedge. Like maybe Darnold doesn't work out. And if he doesn't, we've got this tantalizing athletic prospect in Jalen Milroe, who's was accomplished at Alabama, but has had his struggles at times, certainly in his final season. But the Milroe development story is kind of secondary now. It's shoved to the back burner because of the way that Darnold is playing. So yeah, I know that the Geno situation, I wish it could have worked out better, but in the end, I think that Seattle ended up making the right move. They got cheaper, and obviously they got better.
That's a great synopsis. Sorry for my dog Ketchup interrupting you midstream, but she just went out the door. But my follow up and like last question before we move on from Darnold is that he's been especially productive down the field. You mentioned his aggressiveness. He leads the league in completion percentage and passer rating on throws 20 plus yards downfield, I believe. And so like what has that been a product of? Is it like mostly just great play by Sam Darnold? Is the offense kind of like opening up a bunch of play action shots? in Kubiak's scheme, Clint Kubiak's scheme? Is it like Jackson Smith and Jigba dominating downfield, a little bit of everything? Like, is there one thing that you can point to for Darnold and the Seahawks offense being so productive down the field?
Yeah, this has been one of the great developments of this season because you trade away DK Metcalf, you release Tyler Lockett, and those are two of your deep threats through the Russ years and the Geno years. So now what happens? Because Jackson Smith and Jigba, those first two seasons, had single digit average depth of target. Like I think it was like 4, 5, 6 yards in his rookie season. Then it bumped up a bit last year on his way to a 100 catch season. So we were kind of wondering, Jackson Smith and Jigba is a very good, if not great receiver in the making, but is he your win one-on-one 40 yards down the field type of guy? And then you bring in Cooper Kupp. How much does Cooper Kupp have left? Torrey Horton he's a fifth round rookie. And he's somebody I was very high on and entering the draft. And if not for his injury, I think he would have been gone by day two. And then they had Marquez Valdez-Scantling on the preseason roster, the training camp roster, and he ended up getting released. I mean, it just didn't work out for him because of the rise of Torrey Horton. But ultimately, you didn't have a proven explosive play guy in terms of somebody who can consistently generate 20 plus yard pass plays. And Smith-Njigba is proving that he is like in that Amon-Ra St. Brown territory of top receiver. The crisp route running, just because you're not a 4-2 guy in terms of your 40-yard dash, doesn't mean you can't be a deep threat, doesn't mean you can't be somebody who can consistently get open down the field. Smith-Njigba is an elite route runner with fantastic hands, certainly better than at times in his rookie season. I believe he has more explosive plays than 2 or 3 NFL teams. And that'd be like the Jets and the Saints, which isn't saying much, but still, he's just racking them up one by one. And some of these are super accurate throws by Sam Darnold where Smith-Njigba is getting separation. But there was a play against Tampa Bay where Antoine Winfield has got some decent coverage on Smith-Njigba, and he's able to win what is more like a 60-40 ball than a 50-50. So Clint Kubiak is definitely helping with the play action stuff because that pass that I just mentioned to JSN against Winfield, that was off of play action. Week one, Kubiak very curiously only called one play action pass the whole game. And I'm sure even Gary Kubiak might have phoned him up to say, you are dishonoring the Kubiak family and the Shanahan family with all of this nonsense of straight drop back passing all the time. Like this is unbecoming of a Kubiak. But these last few weeks, they've been using the play action at a pretty good rate, and it's been very successful. I mean, he's thrown 2 picks off of play action, but it's going to happen. The deep shots are working, the intermediate stuff is working. And Darnold's accuracy, of course, has been phenomenal. Like he is not just throwing explosive plays to Smith-Njigba. He's throwing on the run to his rookie tight end Elijah Arroyo, who's got Josh Sweat somehow dropping way back into coverage and trusting Arroyo to win that matchup, which he did. Cooper Kupp hasn't really had many explosive plays, and I think at this stage of his career, he's more of a guy who can get you, you know, 5 to 15 yards at a time, and very occasionally will hit a 20 plus yard play. But Smith-Njigba has been the main guy, but Torrey Horton's another one who could steadily become that explosive play receiver with his speed and his route running and the way that he has shown impressive hands. So, yeah, the way that Seattle's offense has been this explosive in the passing game, I think has exceeded expectations, and it looks like it's sustainable. Now, keeping that in all that in consideration, if something happens to Smith-Njigba, which obviously means injury, I don't think that their depth can hold up. In other words, the passing game will collapse without him. But with him, they are going to continue to be a dangerous team because of that chemistry that Darnold and JSN have had right off the bat. I mean, it's basically been as good as Russell Wilson and prime Tyler Lockett in
Mm.
terms of that's or Russell Wilson and Doug Baldwin. Just that instant chemistry and the ability to always see eye to eye with each other has been wildly entertaining to watch from just as a fan.
Now, you said the receiver group is a little bit fragile just because it's JSN being kind of like the target hog and then some solid auxiliary pieces around him, but not necessarily guys that might be able to step up in big roles if he were to go down via injury or what have you. For the offensive line, would you say that's a similar case in terms of just the fragility of the position, especially considering that even though left guard Gray Zabel seems like one of the better rookies in the league right now, the right guard situation seems to be pretty horrendous. And so, what does the offensive line protection look like in Seattle right now?
Yeah, right now, there's going to be some worry about the tackle depth. because the backup swing tackle rather, Josh Jones is injured, and I highly doubt he's even going to dress this week because he missed last week. He had an ankle sprain against the New Orleans Saints, so he didn't play against Arizona. He didn't play against Tampa Bay. I don't think he practiced. He hasn't practiced yet this week, so I imagine that he'll be out again. In which case, they don't have anybody proven. They might promote a practice squad player, Amari Kite, an undrafted rookie, or go to one of their drafted rookies, Mason Richmond from Iowa, who has played one snap to date, which ended in a touchdown. So, I mean, if he never plays another snap again, 100% touchdown rate when he's in the game. But Charles Cross has held up well at left tackle. He has been Seattle's best offensive lineman, as you would expect, and he does have a big contract extension still to play for because they picked up his fifth-year option, something that the Seahawks pretty much have never done. Not even pretty much. They've never picked up a fifth-year option of any of their first-round picks until Charles Cross.
Mm.
Abe Lucas, the right tackle, they did extend him. And that's a rare time. Again, it's only the second time that John Schneider, the general manager, has extended one of his offensive line draft picks. The other was Justin Britt way back in 2016. And that's after he was bad at tackle, bad at guard. They moved him to center, and he was at least serviceable there. So Lucas, he's had his injury history. So that's going to be something that's a bit concerning. But I think he's been okay. He hasn't been at his absolute best. The interior offensive line is a question mark. And Lessa Gray Zabel, who has only given up one pressure thus far through 5 games, and I believe he's only committed one penalty. So he has been really good for a rookie because we know that offensive linemen tend to have a different learning curve in terms of their development as opposed to other positions. So Zabel's instant plug and play ability has been a relief for the Seahawks organization and the fans alike. But Jalen Sundell has been inconsistent at center, and he is a bit undersized for the position. Right guard, as you said, Anthony Bradford. His PFF grades are very unsightly. Those are failing grades consistently. But I don't think he's played as poorly as that. However, he is the weak link realistically of this offensive line. I don't think he's in danger of getting benched or anything because his backup, Christian Haynes, is on injured reserve right now. And when I was at training camp a couple of months ago, he was straight up not practicing a couple of times, and they said it was for a pec injury. But there's just something up with Haynes, a third round pick from last year, where I don't think the coaching staff is high on him. And if last year's coaching staff wasn't high on him and all those offensive assistants got fired or moved to another job, and this year's offensive coaching staff, a more experienced one, is also seemingly not high on him, it's kind of just Bradford's job indefinitely. So I know that our fan base was talking about maybe signing Brandon Sheriff before he retired, just having like any veteran presence. But I am pretty sure that they're going to stick with Bradford, but keeping in mind it could be a pretty shaky time in terms of just attacking him in pass pro and even his run blocking, which is supposedly his strength, has not been great this year. He is a better run blocker than pass blocker, but I'd rather have one weak link right now than the 3 or 4 weak links that they've been having on the offensive line for years at this point. So, yeah, Bradford is definitely one to exploit, I guess you could say.
That makes sense. Now, in terms of like strengths of Seattle's offense, last question on this side of the ball, do they have like something that they major in schematic wise, or are they still kind of like figuring out what they're best at? Like if they're going up against like a neutral average opponent and they are able to just like run their best stuff as opposed to like game planning against the opponent's weaknesses, like what would Seattle be running on offense?
In terms of like things that they're doing with their play calling or like specific play calls or schemes or anything.
Yeah, I mean like schematic tendencies, like do they really want to get under center and run from under center and then like use play action off of that? Or is it pretty much just like get the ball to JSN any way that we can, whether it's like short routes, deep routes, gadget plays, screens, etc. Like just what does the Seahawks offense seem to be best at right now, or is it still kind of a work in progress?
I think there's still some things to work out in the run game where they haven't been as great. Oddly enough, they are top five in explosive play rates in the running game,
Hmm.
but they also are among the league leaders. In fact, they might still be, but they didn't have but one negative running play against Tampa Bay. In fact, one of the surprises of that game was that they pushed Tampa Bay around in the run game. And that's not easy to do when you got Vita Vea and Greg Gaines and Logan Hall there. But they're among the league leaders in run plays with no gain or loss. So it's been kind of boomer bust with the rushing attack, and they've moved to this outside zone scheme, the staple of a Kubiak offense. But there have been some issues as far as running the ball consistently, but passing wise, JSN is predominantly the passing offense, and you really can't go wrong throwing to him. I mean, it bears itself in the way that Seattle's third down offense has improved. Their early down offense has been passing offense has been really sharp. Expect them to run under center, to have a lot of under center plays, which we expect. If you're from the Kubiak, whether it's Gary Kubiak or Clint Kubiak or Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay, the tendency is to work from under center. And that's what we've seen for the most part this year. A total flip from last year where under Ryan Grubb, the Seahawks were in shotgun over 80% of the time while using a center for half the season before he abruptly retired, who was notoriously bad at shotgun snaps. So there's more cohesiveness, there's more chemistry, and there's more of a coherent plan to Seattle's offense right now. So I think that you can expect a fair number of play action passes from under center. They don't play action a lot from the gun. It's funny. I think they had a play action for pistol on the first play of the game against Tampa, and that might be the first pistol play action they've run all season, and they don't run pistol a lot. So yeah, the under center stuff is going to be one to watch, especially when they use the tight ends. So AJ Barner, Elijah Arroyo, the top two tight ends, and they got him involved pretty significantly over the last couple of weeks. Arroyo had 3 catches or 2 catches and should have had a touchdown if not for interference in the end zone against Arizona. He had a catch against Tampa Bay that helped keep a drive going and towards an eventual touchdown. And AJ Barner had a career high 7 catches for 53 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, 53 yards is not going to set the world ablaze, but he is steadily becoming, I don't want to say a working man's George Kittle or anything like that, but like a very solid all around tight end. I got to be careful with that because our old field goals editor, Danny Kelly, famously called Luke Wilson working man's Gronk because he destroyed Arizona with like 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then Seattle threw no passes to the tight ends in Super Bowl 49. Never happened before in NFL history. So, but AJ Barner has been good. And I think what you're going to see moving forward, maybe to counterbalance the fact that the offense from a receiver standpoint is very JSN heavy, more usage of the tight ends. You're going to be seeing a lot of 12 personnel in this game specifically and throughout the season. But the involvement of Arroyo and Barner as pass catchers, I think, is going to be key for the Seahawks offense moving forward to make up for the fact that beyond Torrey Horton, there's just not enough, really, even beyond Cooper Kupp, there's not enough reliability on the wide receiver room right now to suggest that it's going to be a stable passing offense if you rely on them over Barner and Arroyo.
Gotcha. Yeah, those tight ends are definitely two names that I'll be watching closely on Sunday. Two names on the defensive side of the ball that I'll be monitoring up until kickoff and in the game if they play are secondary players Julian Love and Devin Witherspoon, who, correct me if I'm wrong, but missed last week's game against the Buccaneers, and it seems like their status is kind of up in the air for week 6 against the Jaguars. And so what kind of impact do those two players collectively have on the defense? And like what do you think their status is going to be leading up to the game?
Well, their impact was as such that you saw Baker Mayfield's stat line.
Yeah,
So
that was a layup.
yeah, so Devin Witherspoon, he is, as Mike McDonald called him, a force multiplier. He is somebody who can get you on a blitz, and in fact, he has a half sack this year of Kyler Murray, and he had I think 3 sacks or 3.5 sacks as a rookie. So they like to use him everywhere. I mean, he is primarily a nickel, a guy who plays in slot, but he can play as a boundary corner. They like to play in close to the line of scrimmage. He's a very willing tackler. He's a very willing guy to stop the run. So when he is not in the game, Seattle secondary changes significantly because their cornerback room just isn't deep enough to go up against more competent offenses. They were fine against New Orleans because New Orleans is just a very limited offense, but they can't get away with that every week. But Julian Love, I think, is the most important player on the entire Seahawks, at least this entire Seahawks secondary. But he is at no worse the second most important player on the Seahawks defense as a whole. I could say Leonard Williams might be number one in that front on the defensive line, but what Love does as a free safety is just so pivotal to what the Seahawks are able to do. Like you're not going to see him down in the box very often. He does have a sack of Brock Purdy on the year, but you're not going to see him blitz a ton. But he is just so good in coverage. He is so good with communicating with his teammates. So if he doesn't play, that's a big loss because Ty Okada is his backup. And while Okada is not a game-breaking liability or anything, you're going to have a natural drop off from a guy who's playing at a Pro Bowl level to a guy who was fighting hard just to make this roster. So I think that if there is no Witherspoon, there is no Love, it's going to be hard to see Seattle's secondary holding up. Of course, McDonald will have a game plan a week to game plan around that, as opposed to having to, adjust on the fly because it was kind of late. Witherspoon and Love played against Arizona, and then suddenly, even with the mini bye week, they were both listed as not practicing the whole week, and then they were ruled out. So I don't think they were expecting that. They hadn't really mentioned Witherspoon and Love having significant injuries until they were out of their bye week or out of their mini bye and had their practice. So, yeah, with Witherspoon out, well, I should say there is a chance, I'd say, of Witherspoon playing this weekend. Much better chance, I think, because he had some imaging done on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, and he was fine. But I think that Julian Love is unlikely to play because it's a hamstring injury, and you don't want to rush it back. He had a hamstring injury in the New Orleans game. He probably re-aggravated it against Arizona. And then with Witherspoon, he's missed 3 games already with a knee injury. So it'll be something to monitor very closely because they mean a whole lot to the secondary in terms of their aggressiveness in Witherspoon's case everywhere on the field, and with Julian Love just being that eraser deeper down the field.
I'm curious your opinion on fourth year pro Tariq Woolen and like whether he's also an eraser or like I'm especially interested because it feels like Brian Thomas Jr. is kind of due for not necessarily a breakout game, but his first 100-yard receiving game of the season. He's still like ranks favorably in terms of like targets earned, separation scores and stuff like that, but just like when it comes to actually finishing plays, he hasn't been very consistent this year. And so again, I think he's due at some point to have a pretty nice game just because of how explosive he is. And so he's probably going to mostly see Tariq Woolen in coverage, especially with Devon Witherspoon, even if he plays mostly being a slot guy. And I feel like from the opposite corner of the country, at least, like Woolen kind of seems like an enigma where some fans seem super frustrated by his negative plays, but at the same time, it seems like he does like kind of grade out favorably in terms of like advanced quarterback metrics. And so, just what are your general thoughts on Woolen?
Yeah, he is with DK Metcalf, and I guess Geno gone. I guess the lightning rod of discussion is surrounding Reek Woolen in terms of is he good? Should we trade him? Well, guess what? Reek went out with a concussion against Tampa Bay. He got kneed in the head trying to tackle Tampa Bay's running back. So he's also up in the air. He was a limited participant on Wednesday, but like I mean, until he clears concussion protocol, don't know if he's going to play. So if he doesn't play, Seattle's cornerback room gets really stretched to its thinnest point. And the difference in between Woolen and everybody else on that roster is that Reek is 6'3", 6'4", and a converted wide receiver, somebody who's got the size to play against bigger receivers. Nobody else in the secondary or nobody else in the cornerback room is taller than 6 feet. So like Devin Witherspoon got beaten for a touchdown against Marvin Harrison Jr. Against the Cardinals. And Witherspoon played that as perfectly as you could, but Marvin Harrison Jr. is just taller than him. And it's like basketball. You can guard a guy pretty well in the post, but if you're 6'6" and you're guarding Giannis, Giannis is going to throw it down on you, and he's going to do the too little sign. So I think the size disparity is going to be a real problem for the Seahawks if he can't go. Now with Woolen, he has had his ups and downs. Like he was a revelation as a rookie because he was kind of like, oh my God, did they find another Richard Sherman? 6 interceptions as a rookie, great ball skills, and he's still really good with passes defensed, but he's playing kind of sloppily, I would say. Like the 49ers game was ruinous. He gave up 2 huge catches to Ricky Pearsall, committed a couple of penalties, and there was a game-winning touchdown by San Francisco where he was in position to make a play and he's drifting backwards on a scramble drill on a throw into the end zone. And Jake Tonjes, George Kittle's replacement, was able to beat him out for a score. And you would think as a receiver, or even just your DB instincts, go attack the ball. Instead, he's trying to, drift back like that. So that frustrated the heck out of Seahawks fans. And he also has 6 penalties on the year. Four have been accepted. He didn't have any penalties against Tampa Bay, but with Woolen, the penalties have been an issue, whether they're warranted or not, because certainly a couple have been ticky-tack. And then also the tackling. He's never been the most sure tackler out there. But as you said, he tends to, certainly not this year though, grade out pretty favorably in the metrics because when he's not getting targeted, usually he's doing his job. And we will get on corners, especially during live broadcasts, when the ball is thrown in their way and just assume that they're the ones getting picked on. But um, Woolen at his best can be a shutdown corner, but at his worst, he's kind of like, he's got the Richard Sherman mindset in terms of his ball skills at his best. and ability to cover guys in man to man, and then the undisciplined play of Brandon Browner at his worst, where Browner was just a penalty machine at times and even briefly got him benched. So it's just a matter of can Woolen stay disciplined on a week to week basis? Can he get out of his own head a bit, as Mike McDonald's kind of alluded to? So yeah, it could be a big day for Brian Thomas Jr. anyway, because we saw what Ibuka did in against Seattle secondary, even when Woolen was in the game, but he wasn't covering him a lot. Josh Jobe has been a very good corner for the Seahawks this season, but he certainly had a rough game on Sunday. So yeah, if they don't have Woolen, Witherspoon, and Love, you're losing your three best players in the secondary. And that's going to be an opportunity not just for Brian Thomas Jr., but also for Travis Hunter, who I think has kind of had a semi breakout with some of the highlights he had in the Kansas City game. Did he leave that game with an injury?
Yeah, he's left it honestly, it feels like every other game with an injury technically, but like he's kind of like he just kind of like came up limping a little bit after covering Xavier Worthy on a deep route. And so like nothing seems serious. Like I don't think he's going to be even listed on the injury report. Apparently it happened all the time at Colorado too, where he just gets nicked up pretty easily, which makes sense considering both his frame and the amount of snaps that he's playing. But yeah, I do think that like Travis Hunter has been like open on deep routes multiple times in the past 2 weeks. And so the Jags clearly on Monday night were trying to get him the ball in a deep throw, and it worked out for them. So I think they're going to continue that in week 6 and beyond. Only got about 3 or 4 more minutes until I got to run. And so, Mookie, I'll open up to you. If you have any other takes you want to get off your chest, any like matchups or something that you're looking forward to watching or think are interesting in this game, or if you have any questions for me about the Jaguars.
Well, I think one of the biggest things to watch in this game is the turnover battle. And it's funny because the Seahawks are 4-8 their last 12 home games, and they got a negative 12 turnover differential. They are 9-1 in their last 10 road games. And that one loss was against Detroit on a Monday night. And eerily, they were missing about half their starting defense. I don't think Woolen played, but Witherspoon did play. But they were missing some other key guys like Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy, and they got destroyed. I don't think it's the same situation here because I don't feel like Jacksonville's offense is as potent as last year's Detroit team. But still, just something to keep in mind if Seattle looks like a lesser defense this weekend. It's in part because of the guys they're missing. They don't quite have that depth to deal with better teams. But the turnover battle is key because Seattle has had problems with ball security under Mike McDonald. They have had 12 games out of the 22 he's coached where they've turned it over at least twice. And you might think that this is like a Geno Smith stat, and it partially is because he did throw 15 picks last year, but they have been so prone to fumbling and losing those fumbles. And sometimes that can be a noisy stat, but I think the ball security is a real problem. Like the Jalen Milroe fumble last week, that's just a doomed option play that was sloppily executed, and they basically gave away points and conceded points at the other end as a result. So Seattle's been good at generating takeaways, but what's interesting is they got 7 interceptions, which is a lot. They have not forced a fumble this season. They're one of two teams that has yet to force a fumble. So they're going up against a team in Jacksonville, leads the league in turnovers and leads the league in takeaways, rather. So I'm a bit worried about Seattle's offense and to really not their special teams at this point compared to last year, but I'm worried about the offense and the potential for the game to maybe get out of hand because of Devin Lloyd and company just finding ways to get, uh, you know, pick off Sam Darnold or force fumbles or something. So that's kind of my big deal there. The turnover battle is going to be key. It's cliche, but it's really true in this instance.
Yeah, and that's been a big trend for the Jaguars this season. They actually lost the turnover battle for the first time on Monday night, but they were able to still eke out the win over the Chiefs. And so they have been really effective at not just interceptions and Devin Lloyd in particular in that category, but in getting the ball out. There's been multiple players, but especially Dennis Gardeck and Foye Oluokun have had like just textbook like Peanut Tillman style punch outs. And so that's definitely a good note and something to watch out for in this game. But that'll do it for today's preview episode, previewing week 6 as the Jaguars host the Seahawks. Mookie, thank you again so much for taking the time to join us today. You can find Mookie at Mookie Alexander on X or at fieldgoals.com where he covers the Seahawks. So, Mookie, thank you again. Thanks to everyone watching and listening today. I'll be back to recap the game on Monday with a guest TBD. But till next time, thank you, everyone.